Disclaimer: this video is a work of fiction. All characters, events, locations, and organizations are fictional and created for storytelling and educational purposes only. This story does not depict real individuals or real-world events. Any resemblance to actual persons or incidents is purely coincidental. The Day the Crowd Froze. A fictional political crime story. The sound wasn't loud. That's what witnesses remembered most. Not an explosion. Not chaos. Just a sharp crack that cut through applause. For a moment, no one understood what they had heard. Then the crowd froze. The rally was supposed to be routine. A warm evening in the fictional city of Fairmont, Ohio, where former President Nathan Cole, a polarizing, larger-than-life political figure, stood on a raised stage addressing supporters. Phones were in the air. Security was present but relaxed. The mood was confident. Cole thrived on crowds. He leaned into the microphone, speaking in practiced rhythm, punctuating his words with familiar gestures. Then, at exactly 7:18 p.m., everything changed. Security surged. The stage lights flickered. Cole dropped behind the podium. The crowd screamed. Within minutes, social media had decided what happened. Headlines appeared before facts. Attempted assassination at rally. Lone actor arrested. Security failure under investigation. Police announced they had detained a suspect nearby. His name was Evan Morales. And for many people watching from home, that was enough. Evan Morales was 34. He worked as an independent contractor in event logistics. Temporary stages, sound systems, crowd barriers. He had been contracted weeks earlier to assist with rally setup. He was quiet. He avoided cameras. He had access to restricted areas. Police stated he was a person of interest. Media outlets turned that phrase into a verdict. Evan Morales became the face of the story. What no one asked, at least not publicly, was why. Evan had no history of political extremism, no threatening messages, no manifesto, but the narrative didn't need motive. It needed closure. And Evan Morales fit. Behind the scenes, federal investigators were looking somewhere else. Not at ideology. At money. In the months leading up to the rally, several shell security subcontractors had appeared. Companies with no real history, no employees, and unusually fast approvals. They all connected to one name. Richard Hale. Richard Hale was never on stage. He didn't give speeches. He didn't seek attention. Hale was a political financier, a donor, strategist, and fixer who had made a career operating in gray zones. He funded private security firms, logistics contractors, and risk consultants. His specialty wasn't violence. It was influence. Security footage from the rally revealed something strange. A camera covering a critical angle had been disabled, not broken but rerouted. Radio communication between two security teams failed simultaneously. These weren't accidents. They were decisions, and they traced back to subcontractors tied to Hale. Evan Morales was interrogated for 14 hours. He denied everything. He had been near the stage because that was his job. He had left his post minutes before the incident because he was reassigned. Records confirmed it, but confirmation doesn't trend. Investigators discovered Hale had been under federal scrutiny for months. Financial crimes, illegal campaign funding, foreign investment violations. A public assassination attempt, successful or not, would derail investigations, dominate headlines, and reframe national conversation. Chaos was useful, and chaos needed a scapegoat. Evidence against Evan Morales appeared convincing at first. Phone pings, proximity, access credentials. But forensic analysts noticed timestamps that didn't align. Logs altered after the fact. Messages inserted retroactively. Someone with power had shaped the trail. A leaked internal memo changed everything. It showed Hale's firm had overridden standard security protocols days before the rally, without notifying federal agencies. The memo went public. The narrative cracked. Evan Morales was released without charges. Quietly. No apology. No headline correction. Meanwhile, federal warrants were issued for Richard Hale and several associates. Financial records exposed a web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and coordinated disinformation efforts. Richard Hale was arrested 3 months later, not for attempted murder, for conspiracy, financial fraud, obstruction of justice, and endangerment. The attempted assassination had never been about ideology. It was about distraction. Nathan Cole survived. Evan Morales disappeared from public life, and the country moved on without fully reckoning with how close it came to believing the wrong story. The most dangerous part of that night wasn't the sound. It was how fast everyone believed what they were told. Because when power controls a narrative, truth is always the last thing to arrive. In the days after the rally, the country didn't slow down. It accelerated. News networks replayed the same clips in endless loops. Security rushing the stage. People screaming. Phones shaking wildly as they tried to capture history in real time. Analysts filled panels. Commentators argued over security failures and political consequences. But one thing was missing. Evan Morales. After his quiet release, his name vanished from headlines almost overnight. No interviews. No apology from authorities. No correction segment explaining how close the nation had come to condemning the wrong man. For Evan, the silence was louder than the accusations. He left Fairmont within a week, packing what he could into his car and driving west without telling anyone where he was going. His contract work dried up instantly. No company wanted a name associated with that incident. Even if the charges had been dropped, guilt by headline was permanent. While the public moved on, federal investigators did not. The arrest of Richard Hale opened doors that had been sealed for years. His financial empire wasn't built on one company or one account. It was a web, interlocking firms, consulting agencies, shell security providers, and political action committees that blurred legality just enough to avoid scrutiny. Money moved constantly, from donors to nonprofits, from nonprofits to contractors, from contractors to offshore holding accounts. The attempted assassination had been expensive, and every dollar left a trace. Investigators noticed something disturbing. This wasn't the first time Hale's companies had been connected to security failures. Over the past decade, there were at least 4 high-profile political events where similar lapses had occurred: disabled cameras, reassigned guards, communication blackouts. Each incident had been dismissed as coincidence. Each involved Hale-linked subcontractors. None had resulted in serious harm. Until Fairmont, prosecutors began to understand Hale's strategy. He didn't need violence to succeed. He needed uncertainty. A disrupted rally dominated headlines. A shaken public distracted regulators. An emergency shifted priorities overnight. And in the confusion, investigations stalled. Financial crimes vanished beneath breaking news banners. Chaos was leverage. The case might have stalled again if not for Laura Chen. Laura was a mid-level accountant who had worked for one of Hale's logistics firms. She had kept her head down for years, processing invoices she didn't fully understand. After Fairmont, she couldn't sleep. She noticed invoices billed twice. Security equipment rented but never delivered. Consulting fees routed through companies that existed only on paper. When Hale was arrested, Laura made a decision. She contacted federal investigators. Laura's documents were devastating. They showed deliberate manipulation of security contracts, emails instructing staff to delay fixes, payments labeled contingency response that funded disinformation consultants. Most chilling of all was a memo written weeks before the rally. Event disruption likely. Ensure plausible deniability. Narrative control is priority. The attempted assassination hadn't been the goal. It had been the risk Hale was willing to take. Richard Hale's trial was unlike any other. There was no dramatic confession, no emotional breakdown. Instead, prosecutors presented spreadsheets, flowcharts, timelines, transaction records. They showed how money created opportunity, how opportunity enabled manipulation, and how manipulation endangered lives. Hale's defense argued coincidence. The jury didn't agree. Richard Hale was convicted on multiple counts: conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, financial crimes, reckless endangerment. He was sentenced to decades in federal prison, not for pulling a trigger, but for building the conditions that made the night possible. Nathan Cole returned to public life. Campaigns continued. Rallies resumed. Security tightened. But the deeper story faded. Few outlets explored how close the nation came to condemning an innocent man. Fewer still examined how financial power shapes narratives before facts are known. Evan Morales never received a public apology. He never asked for one. Years later, investigators would describe the Fairmont case as a lesson, not about security, about storytelling. Because the most dangerous weapon that night wasn't a sound in the crowd. It was the speed at which a story replaced the truth. When something terrible happens, people want answers immediately. They want faces. They want motives. They want closure. But the truth doesn't move at the speed of fear. And when money controls a narrative, justice often arrives too late, if it arrives at all.